One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges. With a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold, you can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Welcome to Crossroads. Folks, yesterday was Super Tuesday, meaning we now know who's going to be the main candidates for the Republicans and for the Democrats. As many of you may suspected, Joe Biden is going to be the candidate for Democrats, unless they make him step down. We'll have to see. And Donald J. Trump is the candidate for the Republican Party. He won by landslide is maybe an understatement. He won by a massive landslide against Nikki Haley. I'll read you the actual numbers. Trump gained 722 against Nikki Haley's 46 of the delegates. Total 995 for Trump, 89 for Nikki Haley, meaning that Nikki Haley fell very, very, very far behind Trump. Not enough to put a dent in him. Now, there were some concerns that even if she lost, that Nikki Haley might actually run as an independent. She had said previously, just before all this, that she may not, of course, recognize the Republican Party's agreement, which she, of course, agreed to when she did the debates, that she would, of course, recognize Trump as the candidate were he to win. That raised some questions on whether Nikki Haley was going to run as an independent. By doing that, of course, she would probably split the Republican vote and maybe make Trump lose. But Nikki Haley seems to have been doing the opposite now. She is stepping down. And Epoch Times says this: Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley ended her 2024 bid on March 6, stating that the time had come for her to accept defeat. Ms. Haley announced the news in a short speech before supporters in Charleston, South Carolina. And it says Ms. Haley's announcement comes a day after Super Tuesday, the day consisting of the most primaries in which presidential election cycle, in which former President Donald Trump swept all but one of the races. Meaning Trump won all but one area, and I believe that was Washington. Trump said, based on the Washington, D.C. one, he says, I didn't even bother with Washington. It wasn't my focus. I think Trump assumes he's dead in the water in Washington, D.C., and he's not even going to bother trying. And he also cited the legal attacks against him, saying he wasn't too interested in going there to speak, because given the way Washington behaved to Trump, maybe they'd find a reason to arrest him or charge him with something, as they've been doing, by the way. Now, that said, I want to talk about something else, folks. The Supreme Court right now is readying to hear a case that could determine whether censorship on social media platforms is legal, or whether it violates the constitutional protections on free speech. Now, this particular case focuses on laws in Texas and Florida that restrict social networks from carrying out political censorship. And critics of these programs, in turn, are saying that it's government censorship to restrict the platforms from censoring based on government recommendations. So they're saying it's censorship of censorship and thereby censorship. In other words, regardless of the technicalities in this, right? Regardless of what this all means and the surface argument, a Supreme Court decision on this could focus on the broader topic, because that's often how the Supreme Court works, focused on the legalities of online censorship overall. Meaning, we could actually see a sweeping ruling that could impact not only the idea of censorship, but even of the first part, government censorship, oftentimes by proxy, whereby government officials advise social networks and so on what content to suppress or remove or whatever else they're doing, which is one of the main methods of censorship we've been watching under Joe Biden. Let me show you, folks. Bloomberg has this. It says the long-running fight over perceived anti-conservative bias on social media platforms reached the U.S. Supreme Court this week when the justices heard oral arguments in two related cases challenging state laws in Texas and Florida limiting how internet companies police their platforms. Now, briefly, the big narrative you're going to be hearing across different news outlets is, if you're reading a conservative news outlet, they're going to be talking about government censorship of conservatives, that there's a political bias in the way these outlets are censoring people. And if you're a conservative, chances are you cannot say what you actually think. If you're a Democrat or a liberal, you probably can, even sometimes very extreme things like advocating violence or burning down cities. But, of course, that's the nature of the argument here. And the other side of the argument is also on censorship by proxy. Now, again, Bloomberg says the states say they're combating abusive corporate behavior. The tech industry says the laws violate the First Amendment. It's censorship to tell us we can't censor. And dozens of outside groups have weighed in with briefs tackling the debate from various angles. Essentially, they say, this is a disagreement about whether tech platforms are threatening their users' freedom of speech or are having their own freedom of speech threatened by the government. Now, of course, that's Bloomberg. So, reading that, you'd almost think this is about Republican-led states forcing social networks to censor. How dare those totalitarians, right? In reality, though, this is about those states, Florida and Texas, trying to make it so that social media sites are not able to censor people. And I'll get into the caveats of this. It's a little complicated. At least not in a way that would violate the First Amendment of the Constitution. Rather than say that, the corporate media are saying, again, that it's censorship to restrict censorship. Now, look, there is some truth to this. Like, for example, if you run a website and somebody wanted to publish an op-ed and you didn't agree with it, or somebody wanted to publish something in your chats on your website and you don't want it there, you typically have the right as the owner of that website to delete it. You don't have to publish an op-ed from a political person you don't agree with. You do have a right to choose what to post and what not to post on your websites. Nobody can make you do it technically. The issue, though, ties into a few things when it comes to this in particular: social media platforms and, of course, search engines. One of these is Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. Now, that section makes it so that social networks are relatively free from legal responsibility over what their users post. If someone posts threats on the platform, if somebody posts illegal content like, pornographic images of children or something like that, or if somebody posts, for example, other types of illegal content or things that are abusive in some way that violate the law, typically the platforms are not held responsible for it because of Section 230. The reason for this is that they're not the ones publishing it. That's the argument, right? This is how you separate the technicalities of Facebook, Twitter, and Google and so on from your average normal website. The argument is this. Again, first off, they're not the ones publishing things. They give people a platform to publish things, meaning it's not them publishing it, it's the users. And this is all hinged on the idea that the websites would not have the ability to moderate and censor that much content. Imagine if you have a website that has tens of millions of people and you're not going to be hiring millions of moderators or hundreds of thousands of moderators to be able to watch all of that. The concern would be that no site, no website would be able to compete in such an environment where they are then held legally liable for anything that any user publishes on the site. Now, because of this protection, Google, Facebook, Twitter cannot be held legally accountable if somebody posts something on the sites like pirated content or other types of illegal things. And it's a way to prevent suppression of people's free speech as well on websites like social networks. It makes it as well that these things work like town squares. In other words, if an individual wants to express a political opinion there, the website holder is not held liable for that, and also the individual is able to have their own free speech. So the issue when it comes to this, whether there is political bias in how these websites are censoring people, where we see conservatives getting deplatformed, censored, demonetized, and so on, like myself, by the way, or whether it's people able to say almost whatever they want, depending on which side of the political aisle they're on. The issue is on whether social networks and such should still have the type of legal protection if they're showing vast powers of censorship. Because look, they have protection from Section 230 based on the idea that they're incapable of moderating and censoring that number of people. That they have so many users that it would be unfeasible, in terms of manpower and even money to carry out that type of moderation. And of course, the concern that by doing so, moderating and censoring that many people, monitoring every post, that it would require a type of surveillance and a type of just massive budget to carry that out. The issue is, though, they risk changing the nature of their product if they do that, and through that, changing the agreement on the legal protection. And that's the issue we're seeing now. Google, Facebook, other meta platforms, Twitter to an extent, although they dismantled a lot of it. These sites have demonstrated, most of them, the ability to moderate and censor users to that extent, raising the question of whether, again, they should lose this protection, Section 230. And look, there's more to it also, and this is the real issue at play. Some of the censorship we're seeing is not just moderation. This is the big argument. A lot of the censorship we're seeing is not just people at Google or Facebook being politically biased. In many instances, it's the federal government, directly or indirectly, communicating with these platforms on content to censor. In other words, you have individuals from the Biden administration communicating directly with Facebook, Twitter formerly, Google, other websites, even Amazon, and flagging individual posts. Even down to the local government level, you have channels open where government officials can flag content, where international figures, including at the World Health Organization, can flag content. And by doing that, they advise these websites and even pressure them, even calling them in to testify before Congress, really strong-arming them into censoring people based on what the government does not want you to be seeing. Meaning, it raises the question of whether that constitutes as well government censorship and not just a violation of Section 230. This case, in other words, going to the Supreme Court, could look at all of this. Now, here's more on this particular case. It says here from CBS News, the Supreme Court heard arguments Monday in a pair of social media cases that could transform online speech. It says the two cases concern disputes over Republican-backed laws in Florida and Texas that aim to restrict social media companies from moderating content, which tech groups representing platforms like Facebook and X see as a violation of their First Amendment rights. Now, it notes the laws, both passed in 2021, came in response to what their backers saw as discrimination by social media platforms. The controversy followed social media companies' decisions to ban former President Donald Trump from their platforms after his handling of the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol, which it wasn't, by the way. Now, look, further in it says that while Trump filed a brief in support of the state laws, arguing that a platform's decision to discriminate against a user is not protected under the Constitution, the Biden administration filed a brief in support of the tech groups. It argued, among other things, that the High Court has repeatedly held that the presentation of speech generated by others is protected under the First Amendment, as is often seen among the opinion pages of many newspapers. Further in, it states that one of the cases involves a 2021 Florida law that regulates large social media platforms in an effort to combat claims of censorship. It does so by prohibiting platforms from engaging in certain types of content moderation, i.e. censorship, while requiring platforms to notify a user if the company removes or alters a post. It also compels platforms to make disclosures about their operations and policies. Get that as well. They sometimes not only delete your content or hide your content, sometimes they even alter what you write. That was, by the way, one of the big issues seen a few years back with Reddit. A lot of people forgot about this history. One of the main guys at Reddit was seen allegedly posting using a username, Stone Tier. And some people dug up posts from the same username on a cannibalism subreddit where someone using the name Stone Tier was writing about eating human flesh with barbecue sauce. I'm not making this up. Right after this made headlines, which people I think mostly forgot about by now, the individual, the head of Reddit, began altering content on the platform, and under the narrative that he was fighting against hate speech. In reality, they locked the cannibalism subreddit that people had discovered, and then of course he went and started altering people's posts. That kind of established a precedent of the ability of these platforms to go into users' actual posts and change what they were writing. Again, forgotten history there, folks. But back to this article. Further in it states, the other case centers on a Texas law that likewise regulates platforms imposing restrictions on content moderation, requiring a platform to notify a user when content is removed, and compelling platforms to disclose how they moderate and target content. Now look, of course, we'll see where things go with all of this. The Supreme Court could potentially make a very broad ruling on this that could significantly impact the ability of governments to censor by proxy. It's an interesting argument because the case hinges around Republican states, right? It's Florida and Texas saying that these platforms cannot censor users. If the Supreme Court rules that Florida and Texas can legally censor users based on political censorship, it could create a kind of dual internet system whereby censorship of that nature is allowed. And you could see, for example, different states having different laws on that type of censorship. The other way is the Supreme Court could say it is not allowed at all. No government can censor the internet. And if they make that ruling, it means that this censorship by proxy and other things is off the table. The other issue we're going to have to see is whether this works in the Section 230 argument, again, of the Communications Decency Act, and the discernment of a platform and whether they make suggestions from governments on censorship, meaning censorship by proxy, whether that is also allowed. And there's even the problem of global censorship laws now, by the way, rules forced by other countries. You know, Elon Musk has been exposing some of this, including in a recent censorship demand from India. India demanded that Elon Musk on X, his platform, begin censoring certain types of political content. Elon Musk's response to that has been to implement the laws from India just to India, not to every other country on earth. Same thing with France, same thing with the European Union. Different countries on earth have different censorship laws. And some platforms fold to that globally. They allow countries, the worst abusers of censorship, to censor everybody on earth. Others, like Musk, keep it limited to that one country. And we're seeing issues like this from the Communist Party, for example, trying to force companies to censor globally. They do this to Hollywood, by the way. One of the big things we're seeing as well. In other words, there's many forms of government censorship. Direct censorship, censorship of censorship, censorship by proxy, and international censorship. And it is possible the Supreme Court ruling could look at all of this, or maybe a more narrow perspective, but this case could significantly alter the laws on how the internet is regulated and how much of a role governments can have on that type of content. It could be a major ruling, folks, but I'll keep you updated. Now, that being said, back on the issue of censorship, this could be a very big issue for the 2024 elections as well. Frankly, again, the elections are decided by the voters. At least we like to believe, right? Hopefully. Meaning that when you cast your vote, you're doing it based on the information you've been exposed to. You agree with one candidate more so than you agree with the other one, or you don't agree with one of them at all. It also means, for example, that the vote you cast is based on the information you've been exposed to. The nature of government censorship, especially under communist states, is to limit the information you're exposed to narrow your view, to narrow the scope of which you're able to perceive. And by doing so, make it so that you're incapable of dissent. Now, That doesn't work in free countries where the system is determined by an informed public making informed decisions. It is up to us as voters to look at information, judge for ourselves what is best for the country, and choose who leads the country for a certain amount of time based on the information we've taken in. And of course, there are movements right now to narrow the scope of the information you are capable of taking in. We call that, of course, political censorship. And leading up to the 2024 elections, we're seeing this go into overdrive yet again. We already see some censorship tools getting rolled out aimed at censoring information around the elections in the United States. Take, for example, what just took place in Washington. Just the News said this: an artificial company working on behalf of the Washington Secretary of State's office, our own government, to track election and voter misinformation, flagged factually accurate stories on non-citizens voting that were published by the Center Square. While the reports from the AI company claims the stories could undermine confidence in the state's election process, frankly, I think it undermines my faith in the elections less, or more, if illegal aliens and non-citizens are voting in our elections. But they don't want you knowing that. They say that knowing this is happening undermines your confidence in the elections. It says the Center Square's review of the stories were based on internal government documents and emails obtained through public record requests. In other words, it is verifiable fact. Non-citizens have been voting in the elections, and they're trying to censor posts that tell you about it. Last year, SOS, it says, signed a contract with UK-based AI company Logically to search online content on various social media platforms, including X, formerly known as Twitter, for harmful narratives regarding Washington's elections or voting. The company also tasked with generated reports to be sent to SOS for review, highlighting emerging narratives related to Washington's elections or voting. According to SOS, they say, quote, the criteria for these searches was specified by OS staff and is nonpartisan. In other words, they were censoring legitimate concerns people may have over non-citizens voting. They were censoring actual information on how the American election system is being undermined. And it's being done by a British company, a UK company, not an American company. And again, and also in cooperation with the government, the local government in Washington. Personally, I'd say that is censorship. Personally, I'd say that brings in the tyrants from Europe into American elections and should be considered foreign election interference when our government works with a foreign company to censor content in America that would, of course, inform voters of actual problems. Americans should know about problems in the system so we know how to cast our votes to fix those problems. But it doesn't end there, right? A similar censorship system is causing similar problems elsewhere. Take, for example, what's happening in Oregon. I'll be talking about this part, though, only on Epoch TV, folks, because I'm being censored as well on YouTube. So make sure to jump over to Epoch TV, where I will be talking about how election censorship systems are already beginning for the 2024 presidential race. But before we jump, I recently investigated a secret biolab that was discovered in California. My team and I went to that lab, found out what was happening there, and what we discovered was absolutely shocking. You can watch this special report only on Epoch TV, EpochTV.com. Link is in the description below, so make sure to jump there with us to Epoch TV for the rest of the episode.
Major gaps in regulations are allowing clandestine labs like the one in Reedley to operate.
Chinese laboratories just can't help themselves.
The more you look into it, the crazier it gets. I would ask, oh, what are you doing with the mice? Oh, well, we don't actually do that. It's someone else that does the experiment.
If the Chinese Communist Party wants to start a lab in the United States, there's no American law to stop them from doing it.